On October 19, 2009, 7-year-old Somer Thompson was released from Grove Park Elementary School in Orange Park, Florida at 2:30 p.m. Somer made her way to the intersection of Miller Street and Gano Avenue to meet with her siblings, 10-year-old Abigail Thompson, as well as her twin brother, Samuel Thompson. There they would begin their daily walk home, which included several other friends. During the walk, Somer began arguing with one of the children in the group, Mackenzie Shedd, who would be described as Somer's best friend. Upset at the dispute, Somer ran ahead of the group as they were walking on the sidewalk of Gano Avenue. As the group passed 1152 Gano Avenue, Somer was observed sitting beneath a palm tree with her hands covering her face. One of the police reports says that one of the children in the group recalled having seen a large white dog in the backyard, but that would later be revealed to not be true. The child wasn't lying. There had been a large white dog that had been in the backyard, but the owners had moved, so the kid was probably remembering that. The group continued walking and never saw Somer again. When Abigail and Samuel arrived home, a family friend, Sean Patton, was waiting. They walked in the door at 3:10 p.m., sans Somer. The kids told him that Somer had run off ahead of them, so Sean told Abigail to go out and look for her. Abigail returned about 15 minutes later, still without Somer, so Sean told her to go back out and look really good. He wanted to make sure something was really wrong before he called their mother, Dina Thompson, at work. At 4 p.m., while Abigail was still out looking for Somer, Dina sent a text message to Sean asking how the kids were. That was when he informed her that Somer was missing, and Dina left work to help look for her daughter. Her employer, an oral surgery office, was only a few blocks away. She drove to nearby Grove Park to pick up her eldest son, 13-year-old Andrew Cardenac, and then they drove around the area searching for Somer. She called everyone in her neighborhood, checking to see if Somer was there or if they'd even seen her. Nobody knew where the little girl had gone. Soon, Dina called her live-in boyfriend, Charles Currier, and asked him to come home and assist with the search. Charles worked at Old Castle Precast in northwest Jacksonville, so it took him about 40 minutes to make it to the house. He picked up Somer's twin brother, Samuel, and they began searching the neighborhood as well. It was at the same time that Dina saw a sheriff's patrol vehicle driving by, so she flagged it down. Dina reported that her daughter was missing to the deputy sheriff in the vehicle, and he called in detectives and other deputies to assist in the search. Dina told investigators that Somer was about 3'7" or 109 centimeters tall. She said she weighed about 65 pounds or 29 kilograms. She said she had brown hair, which was pulled up into a ponytail with a red ribbon on top. She had brown eyes, and she was wearing a cranberry-colored jumpsuit with a pink stripe on the legs and arms. She was also carrying a black backpack. The Thompson house was searched, and the surrounding area, including a large park, was scoured, but there was no sign of Somer Thompson. As the evening darkened, the hope that Somer had just gotten distracted somewhere else faded, and it would only be 48 hours before the community learned that the 7-year-old would never be coming back home. This is Monsters. Somer Renee Thompson was born on April 5, 2002 in Columbia, South Carolina to Samuel Sr. and Dina Thompson. She had two older siblings, 13-year-old Andrew Cardenac and 10-year-old Abigail Thompson. And of course she had her twin brother Samuel. Her family called her Grace because they said she wasn't very coordinated. Her mother would say she couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, but she still loved to dance and wanted to become a ballerina. Somer was also a kid who loved to hug. She hugged everyone, even the crossing guard on the way to and from school. Like many other people, Mondays were tough for Somer. After the freedom of the weekend, getting up and going to school on Monday was rough, and she told her mother she wanted to stay home, but Dina made her go, like most parents would. Once Somer was reported missing, a massive search operation got underway. The entire neighborhood was canvassed and the area residents did everything they could to help. Officers were showing up at houses even in the early hours of the following morning, and residents would let them in and allow them to search for the girl. Everybody who knew Somer was interviewed, whether it was her friends, her siblings' friends, or just people who knew her in passing. The crossing guard that was stationed about halfway between the school and the Thompson home was interviewed, and he remembered seeing Somer that morning, but could not recall seeing her on her way home. The path from the elementary school to the Thompson home was exactly 1 mile or 1.6 kilometers. It took them west along Gano Avenue past the Orange Park Athletic Association sports complex, which was a large park with multiple baseball diamonds, a football field, tennis court, and a skate park. She would have passed that park before getting to the crossing guard, so the Orange Park Athletic Association made multiple announcements in the complex asking for details about the missing girl, but nobody came forward with any information. When an officer went to search local dumpsters, he found out that most of them had already been picked up. Investigators got a search warrant for the landfill, which was in Folkston, Georgia. They stopped trucks coming in and sorted through tons of garbage. On October 21, 2009, Somer's body was found, wrapped in a rug. The missing persons case shifted to a homicide investigation. The medical examiner determined that Somer had died from suffocation, and they collected foreign DNA from her body. Obviously, authorities asked for help from the community to come forward with any information that could assist in finding Somer. Unfortunately, that caused people to be suspicious of everyone, and most of the leads didn't pan out. Multiple sightings of people quote-unquote acting suspicious were investigated. Someone claimed a rented Nissan Versa was involved in the case, which it wasn't. Also, someone in Jacksonville reported seeing a woman at a convenience store forcing a young girl into a car while the girl said, "No, no, no." Well, when investigators got surveillance from the store manager, they saw that the girl was only about 3 or 4 and was likely just having a tantrum because she didn't want to leave the store. Investigators also started looking at any sex offenders in the area, which turned out to be a daunting task. There were 162 people on the sex offender registry within 5 miles of the Thompson house. In the state of Florida, anyone who lives a mile or less from the school is not offered bus service, so the children walk. The problem is that, also in the state of Florida, sex offenders are able to live and work within 1,000 feet of a school. Just in case you don't know, there are 5,280 feet in a mile, so most of the children's time walking to and from school, they could be surrounded by sex offenders. Little by little, authorities started whittling away the people on that list, and at the end of the day, none of them would be guilty of kidnapping Somer. At the same time, investigators started looking into a couple of people who lived in the area who locals reported were awfully close with the neighborhood children. The first was a man who some of the children called Grandpa. That man was 65-year-old Charles Watkins, and he lived just around the corner from the Thompsons. He had a number of grandchildren who regularly visited, and a few of the kids in the neighborhood, including the Thompson children, had also taken to calling him Grandpa. He would give the kids rides home from school occasionally, and he and his wife would provide after-school snacks. It turned out that he was close with the Thompsons and had no history of abuse with the children. He and his wife were just a friendly older couple in the neighborhood. Charles was brought in for an interview, and he was one of the many people who described Somer as being overly friendly.
As an example, and I guess her mother told her right, because we took her to the fair, we've taken her to movies, to different little things to eat out with us and our family, and she always grabbed my hand and always held my hand.
Do you think she's the type of little girl that will walk up to a stranger or get in a stranger's car?
What I worry about is that surprises me, because that I had talked to him about being around strangers or anybody that pulls up in a car and jumping into it, type thing. And it wasn't 2 weeks ago I was talking to him, about that. But I've also heard they've done tests on children, and you'd be surprised what they'll do.
Right. I mean,
type thing, and so I think, boy, I tell you, I wish she wouldn't, but the way she is, and so trusting, I wouldn't be surprised that she would. I would think she wouldn't.
mm-hmm.
But I don't know. She's, like I say, she's a very sensitive girl, and her expressions, I could tell she was going to be special. She was very intelligent and just had these expressions and would come up with grown-up statements and facts and things that she's learned someplace or maybe in the school.
The next person they looked at was 55-year-old Richard Corpus, who neighbors also claimed was too interested in the local children. Richard was a handyman who did a lot of lawn maintenance in the area. He was a lot like Charles. He was a friendly guy who just wanted to make people in the area happy, including the children. He had recently gotten a puppy, and he would say that he would regularly find Somer with her face pressed up against his chain-link fence, letting the puppy lick her face. Somer loved dogs and would instantly let her guard down at the suggestion she would be able to play with a dog. One of the details that made Richard an interesting suspect was that his house was just before the street with the crossing guard. Their suspicion was that he grabbed her, which meant she never made it to the crossing guard. He was also brought in for an interview. His house was searched and his computer was seized. He said he had been out mowing the lawn at the Lions Club, but people questioned that story since he mowed that lawn weekly, but not usually on Mondays. He said he'd returned home to do paperwork in the afternoon, where he did see children walking home from school, but he did not see Somer. After finding nothing incriminating on Richard's computer and nothing when they searched his truck, his viability as a suspect waned. It would turn out that the investigators were making their task more difficult by focusing so much on the fact that the crossing guard hadn't seen Somer. It seems the reality was she had managed to get past him as well as Richard Corpus without being noticed. That made her able to get 2 houses down from Richard's house on Gano Avenue, where she would end up encountering a monster. Jared Harrell was born on July 24, 1985 in Mississippi to Howard and Annis Harrell. He had a sister who was 4 years older than him. Not much is known about his childhood outside of the drama created by his mother when, in 1989, she left Howard for her boss. But the situation was not as simple as it sounds. See, Joe Newman was a 53-year-old quote-unquote inventor who had battled the patent office in the 1980s for refusing to patent a perpetual motion machine he had supposedly invented that operated at over 100% efficiency. The problem is, that doesn't exist. No device can produce more energy than it consumes. Despite that being the literal law of physics, the patent office thoroughly tested the device, which they found to generate anywhere between 27% and 67% of the energy it consumed. Since the device did not do what Joe claimed it did on his patent application, his patent was denied. He tried to sue the patent office repeatedly, but always failed. In 1987, he announced he was running for President of the United States, claiming that God had ordered him to in order to avert the extinction of the human race, which God had apparently scheduled for sometime in 1999. He failed there as well, so in 1989, the already married Joe announced that God had commanded him to marry his secretary, 30-year-old Annis, as well as her 8-year-old daughter, Jared's sister.
I think it was 88 or 89, that God told me to do something that I really hated. Because I get up, well, before it happened, was my secretary one day, she told me, she says, "My daughter is in love with you." I said, "No, she can't be in love with me." I said, "She's just fascinated." And I said, I read psychology, and the young people often will assume love for someone who's getting a lot of attention and they think highly of them, and the young person associates that with love. And she let me get away with that for 1 or 2 days, and then she asked me about it again. She said, my daughter is in love with you, and she said she's crying with her heart broke. And I said, well, she can't really be in love. I said, she's got to be just fascinated. And her comment was, she said, Joe, you're a smart person, but you're not listening. She said, this is my daughter. Said she's crying like a woman does with her heart broke. And that bothered me. And I said, well, let me think about it from a psychology standpoint as to how we could help her in some way. But it's still hard for me to believe that, but I will think about what you told me. Well, the next morning when I'm taking a shower again, and I figured it out why God speaks to me when I'm in a shower, it represents pureness. Well, I was in that shower again, and he tells me something that really put a rage inside of me. He said, you will accept the love of this young child, or I'll take your son to be with me. Now, he was 6, just fixing to turn to be 7. And her daughter was right at 9 years of age. But I knew that God meant it, because when I get up to my shop and I tell my secretary about what had just occurred with me, while I was telling her, the girl I was married to that you saw in this video, she buzzes me on the intercom, and she said, you better get down here quick. She said, your son is violently throwing up and is running a high fever. So I immediately walk outside, going back down to the house. And my secretary hollers to me, I go out the door, you better do what God says. But when I go outside, I start telling God loud, God, you don't have to kill him. If this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. Now, it put a rage in me, and I'm telling you, all the people out there, you wouldn't want to be around me at that time, because I was in a rage. Now, I sent a press release out to know you, and that's what I said was my rage at the beginning of this press release, that God has to use a child to get you bigoted people attention, to love each other, instead of have bigotry and biases and prejudice. And that as a man, it offended me so much. And I sent it all over the world, every embassy in the world, all the news people in the world. Now, there's scum people who ain't got the guts I got into my little finger, that's going to burn in hell, who's tried to take that out of context and said that I did something bad wrong because I said that I had married this girl. That's what I put the press release out, to show that love for her. Now, it wasn't any marriage. I did what God told me to do.
I was outraged about marrying an 8-year-old girl. I mean, I did it, but I was outraged. I didn't want to be with an 8-year-old girl, but God told me to do it, so what other option did I have? Your God demanded that you marry an 8-year-old girl, or else he was going to kill your 6-year-old son? And this is someone you believe I should be worshiping? I don't think so. Unfortunately, Joe Newman is dead, because I would love to tell him to his face that he's a disgusting piece of shit. But I digress. Joe went on to make some bullshit excuse that his marriage to the child was spiritual and not sexual, but he would have a conversation with God about exactly when he should consummate the marriage. Gee, I wonder what God was going to tell him to do. Fortunately, before that could happen, Mississippi Child Services took custody of the girl, eventually securing an order for both her and Jared to be placed into the custody of their father, Howard. It's also noted that Howard stated at the time that he wasn't positive that Jared was his son. Annis eventually left Joe and regained custody of her children 6 years after they had been taken. It's unclear what the children's lives were like with their father, but once back with their mother, it was anything but stable. Records show that she had 56 different addresses in multiple states during the years she was raising her children. She had one more failed marriage before settling down with a man named General Daly. It was then that Annis seemed to turn her life around and had a decent reputation, working as the marketing manager for the local Chamber of Commerce, with General working to organize volunteers for local emergencies. Into his 20s, Jared lived with Annis, having experience working in food service, but most often being unemployed. She eventually asked some friends from her church if he could move in with them. Rod and Lisa Buchanan lived in an apartment a few miles northwest of the Thompsons' neighborhood. Rod was a landscaper and Lisa was a registered nurse. Eventually, they discovered that Jared had been stealing from them and they asked him to move out. He did without any argument, but he had left a few of his belongings behind, one of which was his desktop computer. About 2 months before Somer was murdered, the Buchanan's daughter turned on the computer and immediately found a large amount of child sexual assault media. The reason it was so easily discovered was because it wasn't hidden. It was in a folder right on the desktop. Rod and his daughter packed up the computer and took it to the local police station. After receiving the evidence, authorities opened an investigation into Jared Harrell, but he wasn't immediately a suspect when Somer went missing because the address they had on file for him was not close to that neighborhood. It was 2 days after Somer was reported missing that Rod and Lisa were driving down Gano Avenue and they saw Jared's vehicle in the driveway at house number 1152. They thought it was too much of a coincidence and reported that information to authorities. Unfortunately, detectives still believed that Richard Corpus was the guilty party and they were just waiting for a DNA match to arrest him. In January of 2010, Richard's DNA results came back and he was not a match for the DNA found on Somer. It was only then that the investigators turned their focus to Jared Harrell. The house at 1152 Gano Avenue was owned by Jared's mother, Annis Daly, but she and her husband General had moved out 2 weeks before Somer's murder. Jared was still lingering behind and used the house as a hunting ground, knowing that children walked right past it every day to and from school. The family had a large white dog, and Somer was known to go up to the fence on the side of the house to pet the dog, but that dog hadn't been there since the Dalys had moved. Not long after Somer went missing, Jared moved in with his mother and stepfather about 30 miles or 48 kilometers away in Callahan, Florida. Eventually, investigators started staking out the Dalys' new home, and neighbors recalled seeing suspicious vehicles parked at the end of the street or in other residents' driveways. It seemed that the stakeout was also noticed by Jared because eventually he disappeared. He fled to Meridian, Mississippi to live with his eccentric aunt. The police eventually tracked him down, and in February of 2010, they arrested him on 29 counts of possession of photographs of sexual performance by a child. One of the videos they found on Jared's computer was of him molesting a 3-year-old relative. The video was made in his bedroom on the house on Gano Avenue. He pleaded not guilty, and while he was awaiting extradition, he spoke with his mother on the phone where she advised him to only talk to a lawyer and mentioned that she was, quote-unquote, his alibi.
Hey, honey, how are you doing?
Wondering there. That's how I literally think the stuff is killing me.
Well, trust me, you would not believe everything here. We're right in there with you.
I know, I'm sorry.
No, it's not all you. Trust me, it's going to get a lot uglier for them before it's over with. Trust me. Keep your chin up, keep your mouth shut, and get an attorney.
I'm trying. Just don't believe anything like that.
Honey, I don't believe anything. Trust me. And the thing is that I'm your alibi, so I have to be real careful. You know what I say to anybody. We're making no comments to any of the news. The little girl's mother's making no comments, and so they're trying to pull from everything else that they can, and it's making them look like idiots. So the longer you're there, trust me, the better it is. It's tough, I know, but just hang in there, okay?
Jared was brought back to Florida, and it was during the drive with detectives that he started opening up about what he had done. He started by claiming that he had no knowledge of what had happened to Somer, but his biggest worry was having people find out he was a pedophile. He told the detectives that he would take a murder charge if that meant his child sexual assault addiction was kept quiet.
When we were at the rest stop, that was one of the things that really opened up, was the fact he kept telling us in the car, and then again at the rest stop, that he would eat or murder. But he was more worried about the child pornography charges. And, that was mind-boggling to us because of the circumstances of the two. And that was really one of our doors to open up that conversation with him of why he would eat a murder and what murder was he referring to. what murder are you going to eat, and to try to get rid of molestation charges when he was saying that he hadn't murdered anyone. And at that point, when the tables kind of turned, and he finally admitted, okay, she was in the home. And that's...
Do you think he was ashamed?
No.
But afraid of what his mom would think?
He's more afraid of what his mom, what his mom and family, but really his mother, what she was going to think about the molestation charges and the circumstances of some of those molestation charges. Huge drive for he likes child pornography. And he described that he had sat in the home all day watching child pornography. And I believe she was just a victim of circumstance. It was an opportunity for him, and he took that opportunity.
Once they got back to the police station, Jared was interviewed by detectives so they could confirm the information he gave them on the trip from Mississippi. If you're watching the video, the faces of the detectives in the interview are blurred, and I don't know why. I got this video directly from the Clay County Sheriff's Department, and it was like that when I got it. I've seen clips of the interview other places without the blurs, so your guess is as good as mine. Of course, the video also shows that Jared needs to get his coat and his hair just right before the interview.
Tell me what happened.
Okay. I was moving things from my bedroom to the garage.
Mm-hmm.
I had the garage door open, the door from outside into the garage open,
mm-hmm.
and the door from the kitchen to the garage open.
Okay.
I was walking back and forth, gathering stuff up. I was in my room. I filled a bag up full of clothes, and on my way back out to the garage, I noticed Somer in the doorway of between the kitchen and the garage. And when I saw her there, I was, startled because, of course, there was a strange person in the house. I mean, and I assumed I was there alone. Of course, it's
right.
And so I kind of started to approach her a little bit, and I said, "What are you doing in here?" At that point, she started getting anxious. I guess she looked like she was just scared to death.
Right.
And she started screaming. At that point, I walked over to her to try and quiet her.
Okay.
And
so at this point, she startled you. You've
right.
startled her now, and she starts to scream.
Right.
And you said tried to make her be quiet because you didn't want anybody to hear her screaming. And how did you said you put your hand over her mouth?
Correct.
Okay. Do you remember which hand it was?
This is my right hand.
So you put your right hand over her mouth, and you had your left hand behind her head?
Yeah.
So she wasn't against the wall. She was just standing there to get you.
Yeah.
So to apply pressure to her mouth and make her be quiet, you had to hold the back of her head. Okay. All right. So you're holding her. You're trying to keep her from screaming. And what happened from there?
She kind of went limp.
Okay.
And of course she urinated on herself. And
okay.
I kind of noticed that, through all the panic and everything, I noticed that, she wasn't moving.
Right.
At that point I realized that she was probably dead.
Okay.
So I started to panic. I was pacing back and forth. I didn't really know what to do. The only thing I could think of was just to hide the body to get rid of it.
Jared had initially denied having any knowledge of what had happened to Somer, but once the detectives informed him that it was his DNA on her body, he finally admitted the truth. Well, kinda. Of course, his story was filled with details that don't make sense. Why would Somer approach the house only to scream when she saw the resident? It's likely she wanted to pet their dog, and not seeing it on the other side of the fence, she went up to the house to ask about it. Jared would later say that he heard her say something about the dog before he asked her what she was doing. The only reason she would scream would be if Jared attacked her or if she had experienced some inappropriate behavior from him in the past, but then she probably wouldn't go up to the house if there was a chance of encountering him. Now, pretending he didn't do anything wrong and she just screamed for no reason, why was he so worried about the neighbors hearing? Little kids scream all the time. And then if he had accidentally suffocated her while he tried to quiet her screams, why was his only option to hide the body? Any normal non-predator would call 911 and perform CPR. The only reason you'd feel like you had to hide the body is if you had done something wrong. Pair that with the fact that someone, even a child, will not suffocate and die by having their mouth covered for a brief period of time. It takes a while to choke or smother someone to death. Basically, Jared was admitting he killed Somer, but all of his reasons were bullshit.
So I went in the garage and I got one of the red Rubbermaid boxes. I put her in it and I closed the top on it. I took it to my car, put it in my back seat. I drove to Fleming Island behind Beauty and the Beef, and I put the box in the dumpster. I drove back to the house. I got her stuff that was scattered around. I put it in a trash bag. I don't remember what kind of trash bag. I just grabbed one of the trash bags that were in the hall, and I put it in my garbage can.
You come back to the house.
Yeah.
And you put her stuff. What items do you actually remember?
For sure remember it was a backpack.
And what color? Do you remember what color it was?
Black and pink.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure. And then there was like a couple of books that she had just been carrying, I guess. I put those in the bag, and then her shoes.
But the shoes that you put in the garbage can with the backpack was the shoes that she was actually wearing. It wasn't a pair that had fell out of the bag or anything. That was actually the shoes she was wearing that day.
She didn't have any shoes on, right.
And you said you thought those came off just because she might have been kicking?
Yeah, that was my assumption.
Okay.
Jared disposed of Somer's body in a dumpster behind a commercial business. He had previously worked there and he knew the dumpster area was concealed by a brick wall. He also explained that after returning to the house, he cleaned up the urine on the floor before putting her belongings in the trash. Investigators went on to ask specific details about how Somer was placed into the red tote. He said that there might have been a blanket in it with her, but she'd been found wrapped in a rug, which didn't add up. The other thing that didn't add up was the fact that Jared's DNA was found on parts of Somer's body that wasn't her face.
When we went through checking her, there's some things we found that show us she was touched a couple other places. And I don't necessarily mean that anything bad happened to her, but she was certainly touched more than just up on her face. Okay. And I think Kenny talked to you before about the way the DNA checking was done was not just one little spot. They checked a bunch of different spots to make sure that if there was something, we found it. So, is it possible, either before or after she passed out, that you would have touched her somewhere else, either to maybe lower her to the floor, or, like I said,
I mean, it was all done in an extreme rush, but I mean, like I said, if when I lifted her up, I could have got underneath her shirt, as I was lifting her up, or
lifting her up.
Yeah, lifting her off the ground into the
box. Yeah. Okay, you just kind of went up over your head. And I was confused.
I mean, you know how when you grab somebody, you're trying to lift them up. Their shirt might slip up or something like that. But
yeah. Well, and you did say before that she was kind of tiny. I mean, so you got big hands. You can cover a lot of area. Is it possible that you moved her clothes to be able to see some stuff before you put her in the box?
I mean, I didn't do it purposely.
Okay.
And you know, if it was something more than that, I blocked it out.
Well, and like I said, I think maybe you feel bad about it. You don't want to remember it, and you put it in a box. You don't want to get it out. And I understand that. I mean, once you told us, I got to tell you how impressed I am that you've been this honest with us. I really have been. I just don't want this to be something you trip over later, because
I just want to get away from my family. You know.
Yeah.
So I'm doing whatever I need to do just to get away from them and try and let them get back to their life.
Yeah. And like I said before, I think that's really responsible of you. You know.
He wanted people to believe that there was no sexual motivation to the incident. Evidence showed that Jared had sexually assaulted Somer. At the time of the interview, it seems very much like he believes he's going to claim it was an accident, be punished for not reporting it and disposing of the body, but then would be in the clear. The investigators knew that someone with a history of pedophilia is not likely to be involved in the death of a 7-year-old without there being something more nefarious going on. That's when they brought up the video that they had found on his computer of him molesting the 3-year-old. They got very graphic with their questions about what he had specifically done with the child, but Jared played it off like he was just recording her while she was naked and that he didn't really touch her. He lounged on the couch and calmly relayed what he had done as if it was a normal everyday activity. He then told the detectives that he deleted the video and then threw the camera against the wall because he was ashamed of what he had done. The video was on his computer though, so he clearly hadn't deleted it for good. And at least some of the images authorities found weren't something that was deleted and then recovered by a forensic specialist, because it was readily available on the computer desktop. Despite that, Jared still maintained that he didn't keep any of the files.
I used to have a couple of DVDs with some of that stuff on it, and unless I missed one, I broke them all.
Okay.
So if you find one, it's because I missed it, and it's not because I was deliberately trying to keep it. I missed it. That's why all this stuff that y'all find on me it's always been deleted. It's because I do it and then I feel horrible and then I delete it. But you know, y'all can come back behind me and find it anyway.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm not downloading it and you know keeping it, and I try to delete it and I try and get rid of it, but.
Then he had a strange moment where he claimed he wanted to get help for his pedophilia.
And yeah, that's it sounds like a normal cycle you're talking about with doing something you really can't control, and then you get past that and you start to feel bad about what you did and you try to clean up as much as you can about it. That's kind of a normal cycle of stuff we see with these kind of things, and with people who do things they don't even really understand sometimes, because they keep following that same cycle. It's almost a trap. We see it with domestic violence. We see it in a lot of different things.
That's why I wanted to get rid of all this child porn stuff. Because I don't want it on my record or on my family. I just want to get rid of it, and I want to get help, but I don't know if I can do it under the guise of Somer. If we can. If I can just get help and say that, if the press hears about it, or if we can just keep it silent that I'm getting help for it. I don't want it to be openly available that I'm getting help because I have a problem with child pornography.
Okay, but anything you're getting help for comes under HEPA, and it's
It comes under what?
HEPA, like your medical records and all that. Anything you can talk to a counselor about, or any of that stuff, that's all privileged. So
I want to get help. I just don't want it to be. I don't want my family to find out about it. Find out about the stuff that I did.
You're not a minor. You're an adult. You tell your people what you want to tell them.
He wanted to get help, but he didn't want his family to know he was a pedophile, so he wanted to use the case as a guise to get help. Buddy, everybody's going to know you're a pedophile. After the detectives were finished, Jared's mother was allowed to sit and talk with him, which was still being recorded. He can be heard somewhat explaining to her what was going on, but he still minimized the situation. She was extremely supportive of the fact that her son raped and killed a child, but what do you expect from someone who happily allowed her child to marry a 53-year-old man? It seems like the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Before we reach the exciting conclusion of this episode, I just want to remind you that we're trying to hit 1 million subscribers this year, so before you go, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Even better, tell someone else about the channel so they could subscribe too. Then make sure you both turn on notifications so you always know when a new episode airs. You can also support the channel by checking out our merch at thisismonsters.com. A link is in the description. Your support is appreciated, and be kind to each other. Jared Harrell went on to plead guilty to the rape and murder of Somer, where the prosecutor agreed to not seek the death penalty. That guaranteed that the family would not have to suffer through the trial process. He was sentenced to 6 life sentences without parole for the rape and murder of Somer, plus 2 molestation charges against the 3-year-old family member. He was also sentenced to 35 additional years for other charges related to possession of child sexual assault material. The victim impact statements given by many people, including Somer's mother, sister, and twin brother, were powerful.
Well, once again, I think that you should look at me, the mother of the child that you strangled and raped and threw in the trash. But, cowardly as always, you can keep your head buried. 835 days ago, you lured my baby into your lair with trickery and malice in your soul, all to commit unspeakable acts of your own selfish desires and flat-out evilness. Somer was an innocent child. Before you took her life, you took her dignity, her virginity, and then you took her life. After all that, you then treated my child like trash. I don't know why. Only you can answer that question. There is no reason that you could provide me. There is only your own pitiful, sorry excuses. I'm sure you think it's not your fault. I'm sure you think someone else made you this way. I'm sure you were raped, tortured, and killed as a child. Oh, wait, no, that didn't happen because you're still sitting here. And were able to do and take anyone and anything that you wanted to because you wanted to. I would never wish this on my worst enemy, but you, my monster, I would make a special exception for. No one should be subjected to inhumane treatment, but if one commits an unspeakable, inhumane act, one is not humane and therefore not entitled to humane treatment. The court has seen fit to hand out the humane portion of your punishment. Is it enough? I don't think so.
The house where Somer had been killed had been owned by Jared's mother, Annis Daly, but they had moved out because the bank had foreclosed on it. Once the foreclosure process was complete, in 2015 the bank donated the property to Dina and the foundation she started in honor of Somer. Dina quickly decided to burn the place to the ground. First, she pulled everything she could out of the house and donated it to Habitat for Humanity. Then, in cooperation with the area fire departments to use the house for training, she burned the house, being the one who lit the match. Once the house where her daughter had been violated and killed was gone, she turned it into a garden where the community is able to get fresh local produce. She would say that the community did so much for her in her darkest hour that she wanted to do something to give back, and now Somer's Garden is how she does that. The garden also includes a tiny free library where people can leave, take, or swap books anytime they want. She took a place that was a constant reminder of death and turned it into a place of life, now a place that grows food and provides knowledge. As for Jared Harrell, he remains in prison and will never be released. His plea deal included him waiving his right to an appeal, so he will forever be locked in a cage, never able to harm anyone else. And that's a good thing. Studies show that people who have a sexual interest in children do not respond to rehabilitation and, given the opportunity to assault a child in the future, they are almost always more likely to take it. Jared thought he could shrug off the rape and murder of a child and then use it to his advantage to get help for his pedophilia. But the reality is, for a monster like him, The only way to keep children safe is to keep him behind bars. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.